Okay. $668 billion. If any of us had this kind of money, what could we do with it? We could buy a round-trip ticket to the moon. What's going on? Okay, we could buy a round-trip ticket to the moon. We could buy our own private island. We could purchase Amazon, and we could also purchase Bill Gates' network. So now that you kind of have an idea of how much, and also you still have probably a little bit left over after doing all of that. And so now that you kind of have an idea of how much $668 billion really is, I'm going to turn the tables a little bit and talk about that in terms of education. So according to the National Center for Educational Statistics, $668 billion is how much the United States Education Department spends on K-12 education each year. And I know you're probably thinking, Abby, why is K-12 education even relevant to us? We're past that phase in our lives. We're all in college now. But the fact is that I'm sure a lot of us want to have kids. I'm sure a lot of us want to have jobs. And education is kind of the basis for this community. Our kids are going to go through K-12 education. Our employees are going to have gone through K-12 education, so it will all matter in the future. But I'm not going to bore you and tell you statements that you probably heard 1,000 times about standardized tests and homework, but rather I'm going to talk about the United States education system and compare that to the other education systems around the world. Those countries being Asian countries, Finland, and Canada. So just as a United States background, so you'd think that with $668 billion spending on education, you'd think they'd be pretty successful. It's actually not true. For the past 17 years, the United States has scored under the 13th top country in the world. And these statistics come from the Program for International Student Assessment, or the PISA exam, which is a test that assesses 15-year-old students worldwide every 3 years and have been doing that since 2000. They're tested on things like math, science, and reading, most importantly. And just so I know you can't read any of the countries or the scores, but I want you to pay attention to the colored lines here. So the purple line are the average scores for every country, and the red line is the scores that the United States have been averaging at. And so for math, we are way too far below the average line, and even for reading and science, we are not far enough above the average line that we should be with the amount of money that's being spent on our education system. So just as like any sport or art technique or anything like that, when a country is looking to improve their education system, a helpful tool to do is to look at other countries in comparison and kind of look at what tactics they're using to succeed. So one of those regions that is constantly scoring very high on the PISA test is Asia. Countries like Singapore, Japan, South Korea, and China are consistently in the top 5 of the PISA exam every year it has been given. And this is due to their stress on childhood education and adolescent education. An article by Harold Stevenson proposes a case study with both Asian and American parents and their expectations of student scores on a hypothetical exam. The study came to the conclusion that American parents will be satisfied with anything if the scores are similar to or lower than their expectations, but Asian parents will be satisfied if the students do better than what is expected. And so, although this is not true for every American parent, every Asian parent, it is the average, and because of these high expectations, children are performing much better in their education system in Asia. And although sometimes high expectations can cause too much pressure and there can be problems due to that, if the United States found kind of a happy medium, it could be very beneficial for their education system. So then moving west on the map, we have Finland, and Finland is infamous for their education system. They have previously scored at the top of the PISA exam, although they are not now, they're still in the top 5. And according to Monica Schatz, their ways of educating are the most effective in the world because of their kind, laid-back, and respectful approach that they take to education and how they treat their teachers. Education drives everything in their country, and it is all about the teachers and love for learning. Amanda Ripley, in her book, The Smartest Kids in the World, states that getting into a teacher training program is as prestigious as getting into a medical school here in the United States. Because of those well-trained teachers, they're granted more freedom in their classrooms, which means that the students are going to enjoy their learning more because the teacher gets to choose what they're teaching them rather than restricting them to a standardized test. And so finally, we have Canada. And Canada has never actually been in the top until very recently, and that is due to their new educational philosophy. Daniel Hamlin and Scott Davies cited that Canada's tactics consist of 5 different factors: focusing, building relationships, persisting, developing capacity, and spreading implementation. This new educational philosophy has brought Canada to higher rankings on these PISA exams. So in conclusion, as I kind of reflected on all of those statements about education, I was kind of wondering if I can actually compare the United States to all these other countries because we are so socioeconomically and ethnically diverse in our classrooms. And so about a year ago, I actually had the chance to email the 2016 Teacher of the Year from Colorado. Her name is Letitia Ingram, and she won for her award after her studies in Finland. And she expressed her agreement 100% that the United States can learn so much more from all these other countries, but she also believes that we have a great deal of valuable policies as well. So although the United States cannot just copy and paste any of these certain systems into their own, you can take different pieces of each and implement them in ways that it'll work for the United States. The phrase "two heads are better than one" is very relevant to this situation, and hopefully, for the sake of the future of our kids and our employees and the community, that the United States can learn a good use for that $668 billion.